Long ago, Buddhist monks came upon a quiet realization. The calm we chase in countless places is actually nearer than we imagine. It has always been here, waiting patiently for us to notice. Before we begin, you may share the time and place you're listening from. Tonight, you'll hear stories carried through centuries, passed gently from teacher to student in still moments. These are not riddles to figure out or lessons to store away. They are soft mirrors, reflecting something you already know but may have lost touch with. The masters who lived this wisdom understood that truth cannot be forced or reached through striving. So tonight, there is nothing required of you except listening. Let your body settle more fully into whatever is holding you. Allow your breath to slow into its own natural rhythm. These stories work best when received as the earth receives rain, without resistance, without trying to catch every drop. Some will reach you clearly. Others will move through quietly, working beneath your awareness. There is nowhere you need to arrive, no goal to complete before sleep comes. So rest here now. Take one slow, deep breath, and let us begin this journey together. In mountains where evening mist drifts into the valleys, there stood a temple overlooking a silent pond. The temple had remained for 300 years, its beams darkened by time, its gardens cared for by generations of monks who knew tending the earth was meditation itself. Cherry trees lined the stone paths, and each spring their petals fell like snow upon the temple roof. A monk named Johin lived there. He arrived as a young man and stayed for 40 years, learning the rhythm of the place until it became his own. The monk said Johin moved unlike others, never rushing, yet never wasting a moment. When he crossed the garden in the morning to care for the flowers, his steps were steady and calm. When he prepared tea, his hands carried a quiet grace that gave meaning to simple movements. Yet what set Johin apart was his bond with the pond beside the temple, fed by a spring from the rocks above. Its water was so clear and still it reflected everything without flaw. On nights of the full moon, the reflection was so complete that visitors struggled to know which moon was real. The image in the water felt as solid as the moon in the sky. Johin often sat there at dawn or dusk, not practicing any formal meditation, not searching for answers, simply watching how the water held the sky, gathering clouds, stars, and birds without effort. The pond revealed what 40 years of study could not. It showed him how to receive without grasping, to hold without clinging, to reflect without altering what appears. One autumn afternoon, as the air cooled and leaves began to change, an elderly woman arrived at the temple gate. Her name was Fumiko, and in the village she was known as someone who carried worry the way others carried water, constantly and with strain. Her face held the marks of decades spent anxious about children, money, and the judgments of others, about all the things that might go wrong and so often did. She found Johin kneeling beside a bed of chrysanthemums, carefully pulling weeds one by one. She watched him quietly, noticing how fully he seemed absorbed, as if nothing existed beyond these flowers, these weeds, and this single moment of care. "Johin," she said at last. He looked up with a face so open and present that she nearly forgot why she had come. "Fumiko," he replied warmly, rising and brushing soil from his hands. "You are welcome here." "I have come many times," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "To this temple, to this pond. Sometimes I sit for an hour watching the water and the moon's reflection at night. And while I'm here, I feel something I almost never feel. It is Bender's Tua, a kind of stillness, a kind of peace that makes everything else feel distant." She paused, twisting the edge of her shawl. "But then I return home, back to my house, to daily life, to the worries waiting for me. Within an hour, sometimes minutes, that peace disappears completely. It fades like morning mist. I'm anxious again, my mind spinning with concerns." She looked at him with hope mixed with desperation. "What can I do? How can I carry this peace when I leave? If I can't, what is the point? I cannot live at the temple. I have a life, responsibilities. But that life feels like drowning. and this place is the only time I can breathe." Yohin listened without interrupting, his attention total. When she finished, he remained silent for a long moment, as if weighing something carefully. Then he stood and gestured toward the pond. "Come with me," he said simply. They walked along the stone path to the water's edge. It was late afternoon, and though the moon had not yet risen, the pond reflected everything with perfect clarity. Trees, temple roof, darkening sky, all held in the still surface. Johin knelt by the water, and Fumiko knelt beside him. He reached down and picked up a smooth stone, about the size of a plum. Holding it up for her to see, he said, "Watch." He gently tossed it into the pond's center. It landed softly, and ripples burst outward. Circles spread, overlapping and colliding, disturbing the surface. The clear reflection of trees and sky shattered into fragments. What had been whole became distorted and broken. The mirror turned into confusion. "Look," Johin said quietly. "When the surface is disturbed, the reflection breaks apart. The trees appear shattered. The sky seems torn. But what is truly broken? The trees still stand. The sky is still whole. Only the surface is disturbed." They sat in silence, watching. Slowly, very slowly, the ripples softened. The circles widened and faded, their energy dissolving. The water calmed, and the reflection gradually returned. First came vague shapes, then clearer forms, until the mirror-like surface was restored. The trees were whole again, the sky complete. Nothing had been broken at all. "The storms in your life," Johin said, his voice barely louder than the water against the bank, "are like these ripples. They disturb the surface. They make everything seem fractured and chaotic. But they never touch what lies beneath. The depth remains calm, even when the surface is wild." Fumiko stared at the now still water, something shifting inside her understanding. "You believe," Johin continued, "that peace is found here and lost when you leave. Peace is not something you can carry like a possession," Johin said. "It does not belong to one place and disappear in another. Peace is what remains when you stop adding to the disturbance." He lifted another stone. "Watch again." He tossed it into the pond, and once more ripples spread, breaking the reflection. This time, Fumiko noticed something new. The disturbance came from the stone, from an outside action. The water itself was not creating chaos. It was only responding. Even as it responded, it was already beginning to settle. "Your mind is like this water," Johin said. "By nature, it is clear and still." End quote. When undisturbed, it reflects reality as it is. But life keeps throwing stones into it. Problems, fears, memories, worries, each one sends ripples outward. When stones come too quickly, the surface never rests. It becomes constant turmoil. He looked at her gently. "But you are not the ripples. You are the water. Your depth, the essence of who you are, remains untouched by what happens on the surface. The practice is not to carry peace from here to there. The practice is to recognize that peace is already present beneath the disturbance, to identify with the depth instead of the surface." Something seemed to break open inside Fumiko, like a hidden door swinging wide. For years she had tried to calm the ripples, to stop stones from being thrown, to keep life from disturbing her peace. She had never considered that the ripples were only ripples, and that beneath them, something steady had always remained. "How do I do that?" she asked softly. "How do I find that depth when everything feels chaotic?" "You do not find it," Johin said. "You recognize it. It is already here. When you notice disturbance, pause for a moment. See that something is aware of the disturbance. That awareness is the depth of the pond. It observes the ripples without becoming them." He stood, and she stood with him. The pond was still again, reflecting the first stars in the darkening sky. "The art of presence," Johin said, "is this: to remain aware of the depth even when the surface is wild. Not to stop the ripples, but to know you are more than them. To Let life throw its stones without believing. Each splash defines you. They walked back toward the temple together. Fumiko's mind turned this insight over gently. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something other than desperate, clinging to brief peace. A recognition of something that could not be lost because it had never been missing. When she left the temple that evening, her neighbor immediately stopped her to complain about a property line. A stone was thrown. Ripples appeared. Yet this time Fumiko noticed something new, beneath the irritation and urge to argue. There was a quiet space that was not irritated. A depth, simply watching it all unfold. She did not suddenly become perfectly calm. The ripples were still present, but she was no longer drowning in them. She was the water. The ripples were only movements on the surface. This story points to a core insight of Zen Buddhism. We are not our disturbances. We spend our lives trying to smooth the surface, to prevent ripples, to keep the water still. We believe peace means no problems, no challenges, no difficulties. So we exhaust ourselves trying to control everything that might disturb us. But the pond does not resist the stone. It does not fight the ripples. It receives what comes, responds naturally, and returns to stillness when the energy of the disturbance fades. The depth of the water is never disturbed by what happens above it. In Zen, there is a teaching about the mind's original nature. Before it is filled with stories, beliefs, and identities, the mind is naturally clear and still, like calm water, reflecting reality exactly as it is, without adding anything extra. Then life begins, and stones start to fall. Experiences, conditioning, trauma, countless events form habits of reaction. The surface stays agitated, and we forget the depth was ever calm. We begin to believe we are the disturbance. We think our anxiety is who we are. We think our anger is who we are. We believe our endless thinking defines us. But these are only ripples, movements of energy on the surface of something far deeper. Yohin's teaching to Fumiko was not about stopping ripples. It was about recognizing what observes them. That awareness, the ability to notice disturbance, is itself never disturbed. It is like the deep water of the pond, always present and calm. Even when the surface is chaos, this recognition does not erase problems. Life will keep throwing stones, but when you identify with the depth instead of the surface, the ripples lose their power to define you. They become experiences, not identities. The moon reflected in the pond shows this perfectly. The real moon in the sky is never affected by what happens to its image in water. The reflection can shatter into 1,000 pieces, yet the moon remains whole. In the same way, your true nature is never actually harmed by what appears in your experience. Only identifying with the surface makes you believe you are broken. In highlands, where mountains rose like ancient guardians and morning mist clung to stone slopes, there stood a monastery on a steep hillside. The monks there were known for deep meditation and a clear understanding of the mind's nature. They spent long hours in silence, learning to observe consciousness with the care of a skilled craftsman. A monk named Tenzo lived there. He was about 40, with a presence that drew others naturally. His eyes carried a quiet reassurance, as if he could see people's troubles without judging them. When younger monks came with their struggles, he rarely offered advice. Instead, he asked questions that shifted their attention in unexpected ways. Tenzo followed a practice others found strange. Every morning before dawn, before meditation or work, he climbed the steep path behind the monastery to the nearest hilltop. The climb was not easy. The rocky path twisted through pine trees and loose stone where one wrong step could cause a hard fall. It took nearly an hour to reach the top. Yet Tenzo went every morning, in all weather. Rain, wind, winter ice, summer heat. He climbed, sat on a flat east-facing rock for about 20 minutes. Then he descended and returned in time for the morning meal. The younger monks were curious. Some believed he practiced a secret meditation. Others thought he followed a hidden teaching. A few assumed he simply loved the view. No one asked directly, because something about Tenzo made casual questions feel inappropriate. One autumn, a young monk named Kenji arrived at the monastery. He was sharp and eager, always asking questions, wanting to understand everything. He had studied Buddhist philosophy at many temples and knew sutras well, yet beneath all that learning, he felt an unnamed restlessness that study alone had never eased. He quickly noticed Tenzo leaving before dawn each morning, and his curiosity grew intense. What was the older monk doing up there? After 3 weeks of wondering, Kenji decided to follow. One morning, long before sunrise, he waited along the path where he could see Tenzo begin his climb. Tenzo stepped through the gate as the faintest light touched the eastern sky. Kenji waited until he was far ahead, then followed at a distance. The climb was harder than expected. Though young and fit, Kenji had to watch every step carefully on the narrow, rocky path. Several times he almost turned back, questioning whether it was worth it. But curiosity pushed him on. Near the summit, he slowed. Careful not to disturb Tenzo, he hid behind a large boulder where he could observe without being seen. What he saw puzzled him. Tenzo was simply sitting on a flat rock, facing east, not in a formal posture. His eyes were open, looking over the valley where the monastery appeared small below. The sky shifted from black to blue to pale gray. Tenzo was not chanting. He was not performing any visible practice. He was just sitting, breathing, watching the sky. Kenji waited for something to happen, a ritual, a teaching, a revelation. Nothing came. Tenzo remained still, attentive to the horizon. Slowly, the sun began to rise. The sky turned orange, then pink, then gold. Light spilled into the valley like water filling a bowl. The world moved from shadow into form, darkness into color. The monastery walls caught the first light, and trees emerged as distinct presences. Birds began to call. Tenzo watched with complete attention that seemed effortless. He was not straining to see anything. He was simply present. When the sun fully cleared the horizon and the day had clearly begun, Tenzo stood, stretched slowly, and walked back down the path. Kenji stayed hidden until Tenzo was far ahead, then followed, his mind filled with questions. What was the point? Just watching the sunrise? Anyone could do that. Where was the deep practice, the secret teaching? He spent the day unsettled, disappointed by what he had seen. That evening, Kenji found Tenzo in the garden, tending vegetables for winter. With awkward determination, he approached. "Tenzo," he said, bowing respectfully, "I must confess something. If you want knows. This morning, I followed you to the hill." Tenzo looked up calmly, showing no surprise, then returned to the plants. "I wanted to understand your practice," Kenji said. "Why you climb that difficult path each morning? I thought there was a special meditation, something I could learn." "And what did you see?" Tenzo asked, still focused on the vines. "Nothing," Kenji replied, frustration rising. "You just sat there watching the sunrise." "Yes," Tenzo said simply. "But why?" Kenji asked. "The sun rises whether you watch it or not. The day arrives whether you are there or not. So what is the point?" Tenzo set down his tool and looked at Kenji fully. "Tell me," he said. "This morning, while you hid behind the boulder watching me watch the sunrise, did you actually see the sunrise?" Kenji started to answer yes, then stopped. He realized he had been so focused on Tenzo, so busy searching for the practice, so lost in his questions, that he had barely noticed the sunrise at all. It had unfolded while his attention was elsewhere. "I understand," Kenji said softly. "No," Tenzo replied gently. "That is the trouble. You did not see. You were too busy looking for meaning to notice what was present." He brushed dirt from his hands. "Come with me tomorrow morning, not to watch me, but to sit beside me. Let me show you what there is to see." The next morning, long before dawn, Kenji joined Tenzo on the climb. They walked in silence, Tenzo steady as ever, Kenji following, trying to match his pace. At the summit, Tenzo motioned to a place beside his usual rock. "Sit," he said, "and watch." Kenji sat, The valley below was hidden in darkness, an open field of shadow. Stars still scattered the sky, though they were fading. The air was cold and still. They waited, Kenji's mind filled with familiar activity. Questions about what he should be learning, thoughts of his studies, plans for the day, memories of yesterday. His attention fluttered like a trapped bird, never settling. Then, slowly, something shifted. Perhaps it was the cold on his skin. Perhaps the vast mountain silence. Perhaps Tenzo's unmoving presence beside him. Steady and deep like ancient stone. Whatever the cause, Kenji's thinking began to quiet. Into that stillness, the world revealed itself. He noticed the exact moment the darkness changed. A subtle shift he would have missed before. He saw how the stars did not disappear suddenly, but faded one by one, each lingering before yielding to the light. He saw the precise instant when the mountain's outlines emerged against the sky, as if forming out of nothing. Colors appeared he had never truly seen, despite countless sunrises. Deep indigo softened into violet. Violet flowed into rose. Rose opened into gold. Each color arrived and transformed in its own time, following a rhythm both endlessly patient and impossible to stop. Then the sun appeared, not suddenly, but slowly, a growing curve of brightness becoming whole. Light spilled down the mountains like a gentle wave, touching peaks first, then valleys, revealing everything as it moved. Something opened inside Kenji, not a thought or insight in the usual way, but a remembering. He had spent his life searching for meaning, chasing some great truth that would explain everything, and in doing so, had overlooked what was already here. The simple completeness of this moment, this sunrise, this cold breath of air, this feeling of being alive and present. Tears rose unexpectedly, not from sadness, but from something else, perhaps relief, or gratitude, or the strange feeling of realizing a heavy burden had been carried far longer than necessary. When the sun had fully risen and the day truly began, Tenzo stood. He looked at Kenji, noticed the tears on his face, and smiled. "So," he said, "you saw it this time." "I saw it," Kenji replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And what was it you saw?" Tenzo asked. Kenji paused, choosing his words carefully. "I saw that all my life I've been looking past everything, searching for something hidden, something special, something more meaningful than what was right in front of me." End quote. End quote. "And by doing that, I missed what was actually here." Tenzo nodded. "Yes, the thinking mind is like a cloud covering the sun. It is not harmful. It simply does what clouds do. But when it covers everything, we forget the light is still present. We just cannot see it through the fog of constant thinking." They began walking down together, and this time Kenji noticed countless details he had missed before. Light filtering through pine needles, small movements in the brush, the scent of earth, the unique freshness of the morning air. All of it had always been there, but his thoughts had kept him from seeing it. "Every morning," Tenzo said as they walked, "I climb this hill, not because the sunrise is extraordinary, but because I must remember. The thinking mind is persistent. Each day it creates new clouds, covering simple presence with stories, questions, and meanings. Each day I must clear those clouds and see what is here directly." "Is that what Zen practice is?" Kenji asked. "Zen practice," Tenzo replied, "is learning to see through the clouds, to notice when thinking obscures direct experience. The sunrise teaches this well because it does not wait for your understanding. It does not care whether you think deeply about it. It simply happens, with or without comprehension. In that simple happening, it reveals what direct experience feels like when the clouds part." This teaching points to something familiar, yet rarely seen. We spend most of our lives inside thought, in the cloud layer of the mind, and we mistake that layer for reality itself. We assume our thoughts about experience are the experience. We believe our judgments, interpretations, and stories are what is truly happening. But Zen points elsewhere. It points to the possibility of meeting life directly, without the endless commentary of thought filtering every moment. When Kenji first followed Tenzo, he was so focused on understanding the meaning that he missed the event itself. His thinking covered the sunrise like clouds cover the sun. This is how we often live. Something beautiful occurs, and we are busy capturing it, analyzing it, or comparing it to something else. Someone speaks to us, and we are already planning our reply, judging their words, or drifting into unrelated thoughts. The present unfolds while we dwell in memories of the past or fantasies of the future. The clouds are not evil. Thinking is not wrong. The mind forms these clouds naturally as part of its function, but when we never look beyond them, when we fail to recognize a reality beyond our thoughts about reality, we live in a subtle blindness. We experience our interpretations instead of what is here. When Kenji finally became still enough for thought to quiet, the world revealed itself. Not a new world, but the same world, seen without the constant filter of interpretation. The sunrise was not more beautiful because Kenji was present. It had always been that beautiful. But now he could truly see it because the clouds of thought had briefly parted. This possibility exists for all of us at any moment, not only on mountain sunrises, but right here, wherever you are. Even as thinking continues, thoughts will keep forming, clouds will keep gathering. Yet between them, in the small gaps, there is direct contact with reality. A sound arises. And for an instant before you name or judge it, there is only the pure experience of sound. A sensation appears in the body, and before a label or story forms, there is just the raw feeling itself. These gaps are like sunlight breaking through clouds, brief moments when life is met directly, not filtered through thought. And the practice, as Tenzo demonstrated, is simply to notice these moments, to recognize when the clouds part, to see the difference between thinking about life and actually living it. Along the coast, where fishing boats returned each evening with their catch, stood a village washed in soft, faded colors from years of salt air. The houses faced the water, and each morning the scent of the sea mixed with smoke from cooking fires. At the edge of the village, in a small, weathered wooden home, lived an old Zen teacher named Soren. Soren had lived by the sea so long that people said he read the water as others read books. He sensed storms by watching the horizon, and knew the tides by an inner rhythm needing no clock. Fishermen respected him, though he never fished himself. He simply understood the ocean's movements as something natural and familiar. One spring afternoon, a young woman named Ayame arrived in the village. She had traveled far, following stories of Soren's wisdom. About 25. She had sharp, thoughtful eyes carrying an unspoken question. She had studied at a city university, worked different jobs, traveled widely, always searching for something that stayed just beyond reach. She found Soren seated on the small dock behind his home, repairing a fisherman's net. His hands moved easily through knots and tiers, unhurried yet efficient. "Teacher Soren," she said, bowing deeply, "I have come seeking guidance. I feel as if I do not know myself," she continued. "I have tried many paths and studied many things, yet I am uncertain who I truly am beneath the roles I've played." Soren looked up calmly. He saw someone burdened by expectations, ideas of who she should be. Many inner voices defining her worth and success. "Come with me," he said simply, setting aside the net. He led her along the shore to a small boat resting on the sand. It was old, but well cared for, with 2 oars inside. Without explanation, he pushed it into shallow water and gestured for her to step in. She hesitated briefly, then climbed carefully into the boat and sat on the narrow bench. Soren followed with ease and began rowing. His strokes were smooth and steady, carrying them away from shore. Ayame watched the village shrink behind them, houses turning into small patches of color against green hills. They traveled for about half an hour until land felt distant and the ocean surrounded them. The sea was calm, rolling in long, gentle swells that lifted the boat rhythmically. Seabirds called above, and warm sunlight rested on Ayame's face. Then Soren stopped rowing. He drew the oars in and sat quietly, gazing at the wide stretch of water and sky. Ahead, about 200 meters away, a small island rose from the sea. It was barely an island at all, just rock with a few hardy plants in its cracks and one twisted tree clinging stubbornly to stone. No one lived there. The island was too small, too exposed to wind and weather, yet it stood solid and real amid the endless water. That island, Soren said, pointing, is where you will stay for 3 days. Surprise rose in Ayame's chest. Stay there? There was nothing. No shelter, no food. Only rock, sky, and sea. There is yourself, Sauron said calmly. That will be enough. From his bag he took a water flask and a cloth bundle. Water for 3 days, some rice, dried fish. Enough to survive, not to be comfortable. He rowed closer, and when the water grew shallow, Ayame stepped onto the rocks with the flask and food. The boat scraped stone. Why are you doing this? She asked, uneasy at being left alone. You said you do not know yourself, Soren replied. Here there is nothing to distract you. No roles, no one to impress, no duties or expectations. Just you, alive in this place. For 3 days, he pushed the boat back into deeper water. I will return on the morning of the 4th day. Until then, simply be here. Watch the water, watch the sky, watch your mind. See what remains when everything else falls away. He rowed toward the village, leaving Ayame alone with waves against rock and gulls crying above. The first hours were hard. Her thoughts raced. What was she meant to do? How could this help? What if something went wrong? She walked the island's edge, which took only minutes. She found a flatter place among the rocks where she could sit with less discomfort. She ate a small portion of rice, trying to make it last. As the sun crossed the sky and afternoon faded into evening, something shifted. With nothing to do, nowhere to go, no one to speak with, Ayame's thinking slowly lost momentum. The constant mental noise began to ease, not because she forced it to stop, but because there was nothing new to feed it. She heard the water more clearly, each wave carrying its own rhythm. She noticed the changing light as the sun lowered, turning the sea from blue to silver, then gold. She felt the wind on her skin, sometimes warm, sometimes cool, never the same twice. Night arrived, with no fire or shelter. She lay on the rock staring at more stars than she had ever seen in the city. The vast sky felt overwhelming at first, making her feel small and insignificant. But as she kept watching, that feeling changed. She was small, yes, but also present, aware of stars, darkness, and the endless sound of water. The second day carried a new quality. Her thinking grew quieter still. And in that quiet, she began to see parts of herself she had never noticed. Automatic thought patterns, beliefs she had never questioned, stories about who she was and what she was worth. She saw how much of her identity came from others, ideas from her parents about value, standards set by teachers, constant comparisons with friends and strangers. She had been carrying all of it like a heavy pack, believing it was who she was, never seeing it was only weight gathered along the way. Sitting on the rock in the open sea, with no eyes on her, no judgment, no expectations, Ayame felt something loosen and fall away. It felt as if layers of accumulated identity were slowly peeling off, revealing something simpler beneath. Not a new self, but something more basic. Just awareness itself. The plain experience of being alive and present. She saw she had been searching in the wrong places, chasing an identity that would feel complete, trying on roles like clothes, hoping one would finally fit. What she found instead, in silence and solitude, was that beneath every role, there was only this awareness experiencing itself. Simply being here, breathing, sensing, seeing. It was not dramatic or mystical, it was ordinary. Yet in that ordinariness, it felt more real than anything she had known before. This simple presence needed nothing to prove, nothing to become, nothing to achieve. It simply was. By the third day, she felt changed. lighter, as if a burden she had never named had been set down. When thoughts of past or future appeared, she noticed them without being pulled along as before. They moved through her like clouds passing across the sky. When Saren's boat arrived on the fourth morning, Ayame stood on the rocks filled with a gratitude she could not express. She stepped into the boat, and they rowed back toward the village in an easy silence. As the shore drew near, Saren finally spoke. "How do you feel?" "Different," Ayame replied, clearer. "I can't fully explain it, but something shifted. I came searching for myself, thinking I needed to uncover a hidden identity. What I found was simpler. When I stopped trying to be someone, there was still something here. Awareness, presence, and that is enough. I'm 7 tames." Saren smiled, deep lines warming his weathered face. "Each of us has an island like this within," he said. "A place where layers fall away, and what remains is seen. You don't need to travel anywhere to find it. You only need to recognize that beneath the noise, beneath the roles and identities, there is this simple awareness, needing nothing added." The boat scraped the sand as they reached shore and stepped out. Ayame turned to look back at the small island already distant in the morning light. "The world will try to cover that awareness again," Saren said gently. "Life will stack new roles and expectations on top of it. But now, you know, it is there. You know you can return to that place of simplicity whenever you need to remember what you are beneath everything else." This teaching of the inner island points to the heart of Zen Buddhism, the understanding that our true nature is not discovered by adding more, but by removing what hides it. We spend immense energy constructing identities, trying to become impressive, worthy, complete. Yet beneath all that effort, something is already present. Simple awareness, basic being, consciousness itself. Ayame's time on the island was not about gaining anything new. It was about seeing what remained when distraction fell away. With no one to impress, no roles to act out, and no distractions from simple presence, she could finally see beyond the layers of ideas about who she should be, and recognize what she truly was. In Zen, there is a teaching called the original face, the self before language, before beliefs formed, before identities gathered, before life became tangled in stories. This is not a mystical or special self. It is the basic awareness always here, usually hidden beneath thinking and self-definition. The island Soren sent Ayame to was a place where those layers could not survive. Without interaction, duties, or familiar reinforcements of identity, the constructed sense of self slowly dissolved. What remained was not emptiness. It was presence itself, awareness, knowing itself, simple being. We do not need a real island to touch this. It is available whenever we stop trying to be someone and notice awareness in the space between thoughts, in the direct experience of breathing, in the simple fact of being here, whatever this here may be. In a valley, where rivers ran cold and clear from mountain snow, there was a village built along the banks of a wide stream. The houses were made of river stone and wood, with gardens wherever the land allowed planting. A Zen monk named Shinsen built a small hermitage at the village's edge, and people came to him with questions about practice and life. Shinsen was known for teaching through the natural world. He seldom answered questions directly. Instead, he led students to rivers, forests, or hills, pointing to something in nature that held the answer. Those who learned from him discovered teachings everywhere, in water flowing over stone, in trees bending to wind, in the endless changes of the seasons. One late summer afternoon, a young man named Dieki came to Shinsen's hermitage. In his early 30s, he carried an intensity that suggested deep thinking. He had practiced meditation for years and understood Buddhist ideas. Yet something inside him remained unsettled. Shinsen welcomed him with tea. They sat in the simple room overlooking the garden where summer flowers were fading toward autumn. "Teacher," Dieki said, holding the warm cup, "I find myself resisting change. I understand that everything is impermanent, that change is natural. Yet emotionally, I keep trying to hold on. When good things happen, I want to freeze them. When difficulty comes, I push it away. This resistance exhausts me, but I don't know how to stop. Shinzen listened fully. When Daiki finished, the teacher stood and gestured toward the door. "Walk with me," he said. They left the hermitage and walked through the village, past homes preparing evening meals, past gardens where late vegetables were being gathered. They continued until reaching the river flowing strong through the valley. Its banks were lined with stones. From small pebbles to boulders taller than a person, water moved around the stones, forming currents and eddies, filling the air with rushing sounds. Shinzen led Daiki to a flat stretch of riverbank. He bent down and picked up a smooth stone the size of his palm, dark gray and polished by countless years of flowing water. "This stone," Shinzen said, holding it up so Daiki could see. "How long has it been in this river?" "Many years," Daiki replied. "Perhaps hundreds. And through all that time, water has flowed over it and around it. Day after day, year after year, the stone remains here, solid and unchanged in its essential nature. The water," Shinzen continued, "is always moving, never the same from one moment to the next. Watch." He stepped into the shallow current and placed the stone gently in the flow. Immediately, the water shaped itself around it, swirling and eddying. The water moved, but the stone stayed still. "What do you notice?" Shinzen asked. Daiki watched closely. "The water adapts to the stone. It doesn't try to move it. It just flows around it, accepting it as part of the river." "Yes," Shinzen said. "And the stone does not try to stop the water or redirect it. It simply remains what it is while the water passes." Shinzen nodded. Neither resists the other. The stone does not fight the current, and the water does not fight the stone. They exist together without conflict. He stepped back to shore and motioned for Daiki to follow him upstream. There, the river narrowed, and the current grew stronger. Larger stones created dramatic patterns, white foam marking where fast water met solid rock. "Here the force is greater," Shinzen said. "Still, the stone does not resist. It allows the water to move as it moves, and the water shapes itself without struggle." They stood watching the endless play of water and stone, movement and stillness, change and permanence. "You are both," Shinzen said softly. "You are the stone, rooted in your essential nature, the awareness that stays constant, and you are also the water, flowing and changing through circumstances that never repeat." He picked up a smaller stone and tossed it into the river. It splashed and vanished beneath the surface. The water accepted it and flowed on. "When you resist change," Shinzen said, "you are like a stone trying to stop the river. It is exhausting and impossible. The water will flow whether the stone agrees or not. But when you see that you are also the water, that change is part of your nature, the conflict ends." Daiki felt something shift inside him, though he couldn't yet name it. "But how do I practice this?" he asked. "How do I be both stone and water?" Shinzen smiled. "You already are both. Practice is simply recognizing it. When change comes, notice the urge to resist. That is natural. Then notice the awareness that sees the resistance without being overwhelmed. That awareness is the stone, steady and unchanged, while emotions and events flow around it." He bent and ran his hand through the river, water slipping through his fingers. "And when you feel fixed or rigid, notice how experience is always moving. Thoughts shift, feelings shift, sensations shift. You are always in motion like the water, even when you believe you are still." They walked back toward the village. With each step, Daiki noticed stability and change together. Solid ground beneath his feet, light changing as the sun lowered, steady breathing, thoughts continually shifting. "One more thing," Shinzen said as they approached the hermitage. "Did you notice how smooth that stone was?" Shinzen asked. "That smoothness came from the water. Over countless years, the flowing current polished it, wearing down sharp edges. The water changes the stone slowly, gently. It is shaped by what moves around it." He stopped and turned to face Daiki directly. Your difficulties, your changes, your losses and gains all flow through your life in the same way. They shape you not by breaking you, but by slowly wearing away what is unnecessary, revealing something clearer beneath. When you resist this flow, the rough edges remain. When you allow it, you become smooth like riverstone. Daiki bowed deeply. Something inside him had softened, though he knew he would need to remember this lesson many times as life continued to change around him. What Shinzen offered through the river and stones pointed to one of the central struggles we all face. How do we stay grounded within ourselves while remaining flexible enough to move with change? We often think we must choose. Either we stay firm and unchanging, or we adapt to every current. But this is a false choice. The river shows another way. The stone keeps its essence while allowing water to flow around it. The water moves freely while accepting the stone in its path. Neither destroys the other. Neither denies the other's presence. They exist together naturally, each doing what it does without conflict. In Zen, there is a teaching about being like bamboo in the wind. Bamboo has deep roots, yet flexible stalks that bend instead of breaking. The tree that is too rigid snaps in storms. The tree with no roots is swept away. Bamboo survives by being both rooted and flexible. When Daiki spoke of resisting change, he described something universal. We want good moments to last forever. We want painful situations to end immediately. We suffer when we fight the basic truth of reality. Everything changes. Nothing stays fixed. Life flows like water whether we wish it or not. But the teaching is not to give up and be carried away. The stone still has its place. There is something in us that can remain grounded, even as conditions shift. This is awareness itself. The part of us that can witness change without being destroyed by it. The presence that remains as thoughts, emotions, and situations pass through. The image of the smooth stone matters because its rough edges were not removed all at once, but slowly, through constant contact with flowing water. This is how life shapes us. Each experience, each loss and gain, gradually smooths our rough edges. What is not essential is worn away, revealing something clearer beneath. When we resist, we stay rigid and raw, scraped by the current of life. But when we allow the process, when we stop resisting every change, we are shaped into something more refined, not broken, but polished, not destroyed, but revealed. This is the river's wisdom. How to live with roots and flexibility, stability and flow, unchanging awareness at the core and constant movement in experience. In a valley where stone houses gathered like longtime companions, there lived a Zen master named Kenzo. His home was modest. 2 small rooms at the village edge, open to both the clustered homes below and the mountains above. People said Kenzo felt whole, as if no inner conflict divided him. No silent battle pulled him apart. One evening, as the sun set and the first stars appeared, a young woman named Hana came to his door. She was about 28, her face showing intelligence mixed with deep fatigue. She had been wrestling with something for years, and that struggle had finally led her to Kenzo's doorway. "Master Kenzo," she said after greetings and tea, "I feel split inside. There are parts of me I value and admire, qualities I'm proud of, my kindness, my creativity, my ability to connect, but there are other parts I hate. My jealousy when others succeed, my smallness over trivial hurts, my judgment, my harsh criticism. I try to strengthen what's good and destroy what's bad. Yet the bad never disappears. I feel locked in constant war with myself, and I'm exhausted." Kenzo listened fully, eyes calm and kind. When she finished, he rose and motioned toward the door. "Come outside," he said. "There's something I want to show you." They stepped into the cool evening air. The sky held that in-between moment when day and night overlap. The sun just below the horizon, its light still painting the west in deep orange and purple. In the east, the nearly full moon was rising, its silver glow already strong enough to cast shadows. Kenzo gazed upward, and Hana followed his eyes. Tell me what you see, he said. I see day ending and night beginning, Hana replied. Sunset in the west, moonrise in the east. Do you see how they coexist? Kenzo asked. The sun's lingering warmth. The master's voice was gentle yet steady in the deepening dusk. The sun had never seen it this way. It believed darkness was merely the absence of light, something to overcome or erase. It had not realized that darkness held its own worth. That night was not lesser than day, but different, necessary, and complete in its own way. Kenzo turned to Hana. Both the sun and the moon belong in the rhythm of time. The sun brings energy and growth. The moon offers rest and reflection. Day lets us act and build and see clearly. Night lets us dream, restore, and see differently. Neither is whole without the other. The world needs both. Something shifted in Hana's understanding. Though the teaching was not yet fully clear, you speak of battling parts of yourself, Kenzo said, trying to erase what you call bad and keep only what you call good. This is like the sun trying to destroy the moon, or day trying to prevent night. It is fine. It goes against the way things are. He gestured to the sky, where fading sunlight and rising moonlight shared the same space. Your jealousy and your kindness both belong to you. Your judgment and compassion exist together. The parts you reject are not separate from the parts you praise. They are expressions of one whole, just as day and night are two faces of the same turning of time. Hana felt resistance stir. But surely some qualities are better, she said. Kindness over jealousy, compassion over judgment. Is night better than day? Kenzo asked softly. Or does each serve its place? Your jealousy reveals what you care about. Your judgment shows your standards. Even what you dislike carries information, teaches you something about yourself, and belongs in the full picture of who you are. They stood quietly as evening deepened. The sun's glow now a thin line along the horizon. The moon rose higher, its light strengthening as daylight faded. The practice is not to erase parts of yourself, Kenzo said. It is to see the whole. To recognize you are like the sky, vast enough to hold sun and moon, light and shadow. When you stop dividing yourself, peace comes from wholeness. Hana reflected as the last sunlight vanished and night fully arrived. The moon now ruled the sky, bright and clear, spreading silver across the valley. But how do I accept parts I've tried to change for years? She asked. How do I stop fighting when fighting is my habit? Begin by noticing, Kenzo replied. When jealousy appears, don't condemn it or push it away. Simply notice. Jealousy is here. Ask what it points to, what you value. When judgment arises, don't feel ashamed. Just observe. Judgment is here. What standard am I holding that gives rise to this? Kenzo faced her fully. The moon doesn't apologize for being cool. Night doesn't feel guilty for being dark. They simply are. In the same way, every part of you, even what you resist, belongs to the complete pattern of who you are. When you stop battling them, they stop feeling like problems. They become simple expressions of your nature, appearing and fading with conditions, no more important than day turning into night. Hana felt something loosen inside, like a fist clenched for years finally opening. She had spent so much energy fighting herself, trying to be only light, never shadow, only day, never night. That struggle had drained her, leaving her split and incomplete. So I am both, she said softly, both sun and moon, both day and night, both the parts I love and the parts I struggle with. And peace comes not from winning the fight, but from ending it. Yes, Kenzo replied simply. You are the whole sky, wide enough to hold everything. They stood together in moonlight, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, Hana felt inner unity, not because the difficult parts vanished, but because she stopped turning them into enemies. This teaching of sun and moon, of embracing wholeness, touches something deep in Zen Buddhism. We create enormous inner conflict by dividing ourselves into acceptable and unacceptable parts. Then, exhausting ourselves trying to erase what we judge as wrong. Zen points elsewhere. What if every aspect of our nature is simply an aspect, the way day and night are both expressions of time? What if our difficult qualities are not defects to remove, but information to understand, energy to work with, pieces of a complete picture? In the story, the sun represents our bright qualities, the traits we value and easily show the world. These are genuine and important, but the sun cannot see the stars. It cannot know what appears only in darkness. Likewise, if we accept only pleasant traits, we miss what our shadow can teach us. The moon represents qualities that arise in hidden places within us. These are not lesser than daylight qualities. They are simply different, serving different functions. Someone who never feels jealousy may never see what they truly value. Someone who never judges may never develop discernment. Even difficult traits carry wisdom when we see them clearly instead of fighting them. When we stop fighting ourselves, when we realize we are vast enough to contain both light and shadow, something unexpected happens. The traits we struggled against often lose their grip. They become less troublesome precisely because we are no longer at war with them. Like the moon, which simply exists without apologizing for not being the sun, our difficult aspects become part of the inner weather, arising and passing with conditions. High in the mountains, where snow stayed on the peaks, even in summer, stood a hermitage so remote, only devoted seekers reached it. The path wound through pine forests that thinned into rocky slopes where only tough plants survived. At the highest point before the eternal snowfields, a small stone hut clung to the mountain. A monk named Riku had lived there for 7 years. He came seeking solitude, hoping to understand his mind through intense practice. Far from worldly distraction, his days followed a simple rhythm: meditation, plain meals, tending basic needs, then more meditation. The mountain silence had taught him many things, yet something remained unopened within him, a barrier frozen despite years of effort. One winter morning, Riku awoke to a transformed world. Snow had fallen silently through the night, covering everything in white. The small lake below his hermitage, partly frozen for weeks, was now completely solid. Its surface was a flawless sheet of ice, blanketed by fresh snow. Riku looked at the lake and felt it reflect his inner life. Despite years of practice and insight, parts of him remained unreachable, memories avoided, emotions frozen instead of felt. He had found a kind of peace, but it was numb peace, built on distance, not true openness. Something inside knew the moment had come. Time to cross the frozen lake, literally and inwardly, time to face what he had avoided. He wrapped himself in thick robes and began descending toward the lake. Snow reached his knees in places, and cold air burned his lungs. Still, he moved step by step until he reached the lake's edge. The ice was thick, solid, buried beneath soft snow. On the far shore stood another hermitage, abandoned yet intact, once home to monks generations ago. Riku had never crossed to it. Summer waters were too hard to pass, and winter always offered excuses. Now he saw those reasons as fear disguised as practicality. He stepped onto the ice. Beneath the snow, it felt hard and unyielding. The surface held him easily, yet each step felt uncertain, as if solidity might suddenly fail. Riku realized the ice mirrored the barrier within him, firm and protective, keeping things apart. The lake's water still flowed beneath, alive yet sealed away, unreachable. He remembered the grief he never allowed himself to feel when his mother died. Young and newly training, he buried himself in discipline to avoid raw loss. That grief froze beneath the surface, and he built his life above it. He recalled anger toward his father, who wanted him to inherit the family trade, and felt betrayed by his path. That anger was never expressed, only frozen at a safe distance. He saw his fear of intimacy too, choosing isolation because closeness felt dangerous and unpredictable. That fear was frozen as well, solid and unmoving. With each step, these truths sharpened. He was not merely crossing ice. He was recognizing the frozen places inside himself. Emotions locked away instead of fully lived. Halfway across, Riku stopped. The far hermitage felt distant. The one behind faded into falling snow. Standing amid white silence, he felt the weight he carried. Then, something unexpected arose. As he breathed the sharp air, fully present, he felt warmth. Not bodily warmth, but another kind. Warmth born from attention, from willingness to face what he had avoided. His breath, visible in cold air, carried heat. Each exhale formed a warm cloud, fading into the cold. It rose from within him, from life itself, from being present and alive. He knelt on the ice and brushed away the snow. Beneath it, the ice was clear enough to reveal dark shapes below. The water was still there, alive under the frozen surface, not gone, only held in another state. In that moment, Riku understood something. The ice of his inner defenses was not as permanent as he believed. His own warm attention, his willingness to stay present with what he had frozen, could begin to soften it, not by force or breaking, but slowly, like spring reaching even the highest peaks. He continued across the lake, bringing awareness to each frozen place inside. He did not push or demand change. He simply acknowledged them, breathing warmth through attention, letting them know they no longer had to stay frozen to protect him. When he reached the far shore and stepped onto solid ground, he looked back. He had crossed the lake. The barrier that once felt absolute was only ice, solid yet temporary, shaped by conditions and open to change. He explored the abandoned hermitage briefly, finding calm in its emptiness. Yet the real discovery had happened during the crossing itself. In those moments of walking across his frozen inner terrain with awareness and willingness to feel, the return felt different. He trusted the ice now. His inner barriers still existed, but they were no longer impenetrable. Awareness was gentle but persistent. Given time, even the oldest ice could soften. Back home, Riku sat in meditation with new insight. For years, he believed peace came from distance, from keeping everything frozen. Now he saw peace would come from allowing warmth, from feeling what needed feeling, facing what needed facing, letting his inner waters move again. It would not happen instantly. The ice had formed over years and would melt slowly. But the first step was taken. By crossing the lake and acknowledging what lay beneath, the thaw had already begun. This teaching speaks to many of us. We often freeze parts of ourselves for protection. When pain feels too intense, numbness seems safer. We build inner ice and call it strength or wisdom. Believing this means moving on, but frozen is not healed. The water beneath the ice remains, held rigid. Unfelt emotions do not vanish. They stay locked away, consuming energy to keep frozen. Zen teaches meeting experience directly, without armor or inner walls. This does not mean being overwhelmed. It means allowing what is present, acknowledging truth even when it is hard. Riku's crossing represents the courage to face frozen places, old griefs, buried anger, unspoken fears, hidden truths. The ice protects us from pain but also from full aliveness. Maintaining it costs energy that could be used for living. The warmth Riku found was awareness itself. When we turn toward frozen places, change begins. Slowly, like spring entering frozen earth. The practice is simple, though it asks for courage. When we notice frozen places inside us, we do not condemn them or try to shatter them. We simply acknowledge them, offering the gentle warmth of awareness, willing to feel what we once kept distant, trusting time and patience to soften even ancient ice. In a forest where ancient trees rose so high their branches seemed to support the sky, there stood a monastery older than memory. Its buildings were made of dark wood aged to deep tones, with soft green moss growing along the northern walls, shaped by countless seasons. Surrounding the monastery were gardens tended with the same devotion as meditation itself. Each plant cared for like a living lesson, A monk named Isamu had lived there for 25 years. The garden was his responsibility, chosen not by duty, but by natural calling. Working with growing things spoke to him more deeply than texts or formal sitting ever had. The other monks recognized this, understanding there are many paths to insight. Isamu's garden differed from formal temple gardens found in cities. It was not shaped for beauty or symbolism, but for nourishment, growing vegetables and herbs through the seasons. Yet anyone walking through could sense more. Isamu's care for soil, water, and timing turned ordinary gardening into something close to prayer. One spring morning, as frost loosened its grip and green shoots broke through dark soil, a young monk named Teo approached Isamu. Teo had arrived only 6 months earlier and struggled with a challenge common to new practitioners. He understood the teachings intellectually and spoke philosophy clearly, yet something felt absent. The teachings lived in his mind, but had not changed him from within. Isamu knelt beside young seedlings, examining them with full, unhurried attention. When he noticed Teo, he looked up without irritation, only openness. "Isamu," Teo said, bowing, "may I speak with you about something troubling me?" "Of course," Isamu replied, inviting him to sit beside the garden bed. Teo searched for words. "I meditate daily. I study and try to stay mindful, but I do not feel transformed. I wait for enlightenment, some moment that changes everything, but nothing happens." Isamu listened quietly, fully present. "I feel the same as when I arrived," Teo continued, "only more knowledgeable." Isamu smiled softly. "Come," he said, rising easily. "Help me in the garden today. We can talk as we work." He led Teo to soil already turned but not planted. "This will hold our summer vegetables," Isamu explained. "Tomatoes, beans, squash." He knelt and began pulling small weeds from the earth, though planting had not yet begun. You cannot force a plant to reach full growth in a week just because you are impatient. Everything has its own season and rhythm. Isamu moved to another bed where lilies were just emerging, their shoots pale and small. These lilies had lived here for many years. Each spring they return, growing more beautiful each time. Yet they need care different from roses or vegetables. Some need more water, others less. Some love full sun, others shade. There is no single method that fits everything. Teo kept weeding, beginning to understand. "You speak of waiting for enlightenment," Isamu said gently, "for one moment that changes everything. But transformation is usually gradual, like this garden. Small changes over time, daily weeding so harmful growth does not take over. Steady watering so roots grow deep, paying attention to what each part needs, what requires more care or less." He walked to a rose bush, showing disease on some branches. "This rose is healthy overall, but these branches are sick. Left alone, the illness would spread. Sometimes we must prune what harms us. Old relationships that strengthen bad habits, activities that drain without nourishing, beliefs that cause suffering." Isamu carefully cut the diseased branches, his movements firm yet gentle, removing what was harmful while preserving the living plant. "But pruning is not the only work," Isamu continued. He led Teo to rows of seedlings barely an inch tall. "These are beginnings. New practices, new ways of seeing. They are fragile now and need protection. With steady care, they will grow strong." He knelt and gently watered them, moisture soaking into the soil. This is practice, not one dramatic event, but daily care. Small acts repeated faithfully, weeding the mind of unhelpful patterns, pruning what harms, watering what we wish to grow, protecting new growth until it takes root. Teo felt a shift. He had been waiting for a dramatic breakthrough, but Isamu showed him something else. Practice is like gardening, not lightning. Patient, steady attention over time, trusting natural growth. They worked together for hours. Each task carried a lesson. Building a trellis, Isamu spoke of structure supporting practice, spreading compost. He spoke of nourishment from teachers, teachings, and community. When they sat quietly in the late sun, Isamu said nothing, letting the moment teach. As evening came, Teo bowed deeply. "I understand now," he said. "I was looking for harvest when I had barely planted seeds. I wanted the garden finished when the work had just begun." Isamu smiled. "The garden is never complete. Even in winter, work continues unseen. Soil rests. Seeds wait. This, too, is practice. Sometimes growth is visible, sometimes hidden. Still, the work continues through every season." Walking back to the monastery, Teo felt relief. He did not need instant transformation. He only needed to tend his inner garden day by day. This teaching of inner gardening reflects something essential in Zen. Practice is not about dramatic results but consistent care. Many approach practice expecting sudden enlightenment that changes everything at once. When it does not happen, discouragement follows. But Isamu shows another way. The garden grows through daily attention. No single watering makes plants flourish. No single weeding clears everything forever. Growth comes from many small acts done faithfully. In our practice, meditation or mindfulness, the same applies. We are tending an inner garden. Some days we weed harmful thoughts. Some days we water kindness or patience. Some days we prune what no longer serves us. Some days we simply sit, appreciating the garden as it is. Different plants need different care, just like different parts of ourselves. Some aspects need gentleness and time. Others grow vigorously and need space. There is no single technique for everything. Through patience and attention, we learn what each part needs. The seedlings represent new practices we are nurturing. They are delicate in the beginning. If we judge them for not being mature right away, we weaken our own effort. If we stop caring because results are not dramatic, they fade, but with patience and protection, they slowly take root and eventually grow strong. Most importantly, Isamu reminds us that the garden is never complete. There is no final stage where nothing needs care. Even in winter, when growth is unseen, work continues beneath the soil. This is not failure. It is simply the nature of being alive. Tending continues through every season, and each season carries its own beauty and demands. In mountains whose peaks rose above the clouds, there was a practice some monks followed, seeking balance between different kinds of understanding. A monk named Goro devoted his life to it. Goro spent his mornings high on the mountain slopes, sometimes reaching the summit where air was thin and the view stretched endlessly. Surrounded by rock, snow, and sky, he sat in meditation. From that height, daily concerns appeared small and distant. Problems that felt overwhelming in the valley seemed minor from the peak. He could see patterns and connections invisible below. The broad design, how everything fit into a larger whole. But Goro did not remain on the summit. Each afternoon, he descended to the valley. In the village, he worked simply, repairing roofs, sitting with the grieving, playing with children, sharing meals with families. Down there, concerns that seemed small from above became immediate and real again. A mother's fear for a sick child, a farmer's worry about crops, an elder's loneliness. These were not small to those living them. They were everything. This movement between mountain and valley became Goro's practice. Each morning he climbed toward the peak, seeking clarity and spacious understanding. Each afternoon he returned to the valley, to the particular, the messy reality of human life. One autumn, a young monk named Jiro came to study with him. Jiro had spent years in deep meditation, sitting long hours and studying the mind. He gained real insight, yet felt something missing. He had heard Goro's way offered balance. On his first morning, Goro invited him to climb the mountain. They began before dawn, walking in silence up steep paths as the sky slowly brightened. The altitude made each breath effortful. Eventually they reached an open place where the mountain revealed a vast view. The valley spread below like a painting, the village barely visible in mist. Above them, the sky shifted from gray to blue, sunlight touching the highest peaks. Goro sat on a flat rock and signaled Jiro to sit. After long silence, he asked, "What do you notice?" Jiro replied, "Everything feels connected. I can see how the river flows from snow to valley, feeding fields and homes. I can see weather systems forming, clouds collecting over faraway ridges. Everything belongs to a greater system." "Yes," Goro said. "From height, we see patterns and connections. Personal problems shrink, becoming small movements within a vast landscape. This view creates a certain calm, a feeling of spacious ease." They remained in that openness a while. Then Goro stood. "Now we descend." The way down took longer, using different muscles, requiring different attention. By afternoon, the valley was alive with daily activity. Goro brought Jiro to a small home where an elderly woman lived alone. Her husband had died the year before, her children far away. Over tea, she spoke of loneliness and daily struggles. Later, they helped a farmer repair a fence damaged by a fallen tree. The work was simple yet demanding, needing full presence. Hammer, nail, wood, nothing else. That evening, walking back to Goro's modest dwelling, Jiro was silent. Finally, he said, "Teacher, I see what you show me, but I am confused. On the mountain, we see problems as small parts of something vast. We touch something impersonal. But in the valley, we treat individual concerns as fully real and important. These feel contradictory. Which view is true?" Goro smiled gently. "Both are true," he said. "Neither is complete alone." He pointed toward the mountain. "Up there, we remember we belong to something larger than personal stories. Our suffering arises from conditions, like everything else. This view keeps us from drowning in drama, from thinking our pain is the center of existence." Then he gestured toward the village. "But here, we remember that each moment, each person, each act of care matters completely to the one living it. A mother's fear for her child is not less real because it is universal. It is her fear now, deserving full attention and compassion." They walked on as Goro continued. "Some practitioners remain only on the mountain. They gain insight into emptiness and vast awareness, but may grow detached, unable to meet suffering warmly. They see from height, but lack grounding. Others stay only in the valley. They serve tirelessly, yet become overwhelmed by endless need. Exhausted without perspective, they engage fully, but lack spaciousness." Jiro walked in silence, beginning to understand. "The complete practice," Goro said, "is moving between both. To climb high enough to see patterns and vastness, then descend to care fully for this moment, this person, this task, as if nothing else existed." In the weeks that followed, Jiro adopted Goro's rhythm. Each morning they climbed to the heights, sitting in wide openness, reflecting on mind and reality, touching something vast and impersonal. Each afternoon they returned to the valley, meeting whatever arose with full attention and care. Slowly, Jiro felt a balance forming within him. He could hold both views at once. Sitting with someone in pain, he stayed fully present while also seeing it as part of a wider pattern. In meditation, he felt spacious awareness while honoring this moment, this life. One evening, after weeks of practice, Jiro and Goro sat outside the hut, watching daylight fade. The peak still glowed with sunlight, while the valley lay in shadow. "I think I'm beginning to understand," Jiro said softly. "The mountain and the valley are not separate paths. They are two sides of one whole practice. We need both the wide view and close engagement, both spaciousness and detail, pattern in this moment." "Yes," Goro replied. "And see how each supports the other. The mountain morning gives you space to work in the valley without overwhelm. The valley afternoon gives grounding and warmth, so the mountain practice does not become distant or abstract. Each makes the other possible." Jiro felt something settle inside, a sense of wholeness he had been seeking without knowing. Living only at height had left him detached from real life, moving between mountain and valley, between openness and immediacy. He felt more complete, able to be wise and warm, clear and caring. This teaching of mountain and valley, of balancing perspectives, touches something essential in practice. We often think wisdom means choosing one view over another. Goro shows that completeness comes from holding multiple views and letting them balance each other. The mountain represents the absolute view. From there, we see connection, conditions, and the constructed nature of self. This view is true and valuable. It keeps us from being lost entirely in our personal stories and struggles. It offers space and clarity. But the mountain alone is not enough. Staying only there can make us detached, unable to meet suffering with warmth. Knowing suffering is impersonal does not help the person who is hurting right now. Without the valley, the mountain becomes avoidance. Yet the valley alone can overwhelm us. If we never step back, never see the larger pattern, we exhaust ourselves in endless demands and problems. We lose perspective and burn out. Goro's practice is one of balance and movement. We climb to the mountain for spaciousness and renewal, to remember the larger whole. Then we return refreshed, able to meet the particulars without drowning in them. Then we return to the valley, meeting life as it actually appears, offering care and attention to real people and real moments. Neither view erases the other. Together they form a complete path, both spacious and intimate, wise yet warm, clear about reality and present to this moment. This is the wisdom of moving between mountain and valley, between the wide view and the immediate detail, holding both as parts of one living practice. On a high mountain where snow lingered year-round, an ancient monastery stood, carved partly into solid rock. Only a small number of monks lived there, perhaps a dozen at most, surviving simply in the severe climate. Their days were disciplined, shaped by long meditation and study. A young monk named Saburo arrived there at the age of 23. He came with strong credentials, trained at a renowned temple in the capital, known as one of the most gifted students of his generation. His teachers praised his sharp mind, his grasp of complex ideas, and his skill in debate. Saburo had memorized large sections of Buddhist scripture and could explain subtle doctrines with ease. When he arrived at the mountain monastery, he carried not only his few belongings, but also a quiet confidence in his own accomplishments. He knew he surpassed most monks his age in knowledge, and took pride in his understanding and study. He did not see this as arrogance, only as accurate self-assessment. The abbot, an elderly monk named Fumio, was about 70, shaped by years of mountain life. His face bore deep lines from wind and snow, and his eyes seemed to hold unfathomable depth. When Saburo met him, Fumio sat in a small room facing the snowy peaks. Saburo bowed and spoke of his education, his texts, and the praise he had received. Fumio listened without reaction. When Saburo finished, the abbot simply nodded. "Come with me," he said. He led Saburo through stone corridors to a storage room and opened a wooden box, removing a tiny seed resting in his palm. "Do you know what this is?" Fumio asked. Saburo examined the small brown seed. It appeared ordinary, oval, and plain. "A seed," he replied. "Perhaps cherry or plum. Without growth, it is difficult to be certain." "It is a cherry seed," Fumio said. "Tell me," the abbot continued, "what does this seed contain?" Saburo answered confidently. "It holds the full genetic pattern of a cherry tree. Everything needed for roots, trunk, leaves, blossoms, fruit, and future seeds." "Very good," Fumio said. "You have studied well." He held the seed closer. "And tell me, is this seed valuable?" Saburo paused, then replied, "In a way, yes. It holds the possibility of becoming a great tree. But alone, without soil, water, sunlight, and time, it remains only a seed. Its worth lies in what it may become, not in what it is now." Fumio smiled faintly, as if the lesson had already begun. "This seed is now your responsibility," Fumio said, placing it in Saburo's hand. "Plant it, care for it, and learn from it. When you understand its teaching, Return to me. Saburo accepted the seed, confused. He had expected advanced teachings. Not this. Instead, he had been given a seed. It felt almost childish. Still, he did not question the abbot. He found a sheltered corner in the courtyard, planted the seed carefully, watered it, and marked the place. Days passed, then weeks. Saburo continued meditation, study, and daily duties. Each day he checked the soil. Nothing appeared. After a month, impatience crept in. Maybe the seed was too old. Maybe the climate was too severe. He thought of asking Fumio, but hesitated. He sensed the task was about more than growth itself. 2 months passed. Still nothing. He kept watering the bare soil, feeling quietly foolish. Why water empty ground? In his 3rd month, something shifted. He had watched the soil so closely that he had missed changes within himself. One morning in meditation, he noticed his mind had grown quieter. The constant inner commentary, judging and comparing, had softened. Not gone, but reduced. He also noticed he listened differently. Before, he prepared answers, while others spoke. Now, he sometimes just listened. He no longer felt the need to prove his knowledge. Near the end of the 3rd month, he checked the soil again and saw the smallest green shoot pushing upward. He knelt to see it clearly. 2 pale leaves, delicate and reaching for light. Joy rose unexpectedly. The seed had sprouted. After 3 months of watering with no visible result, life appeared. Then he paused, watching his own reaction. The seed had been growing all along. Just because he could not see it did not mean nothing was happening. Beneath the surface, roots formed, the shell softened, energy gathered in darkness. All this occurred while he waited impatiently. Saburo went to Fumio, who sat silently in the hall. When the abbot opened his eyes, Saburo said, "The seed has sprouted." "Has it?" Fumio replied. "Or did it sprout long ago, and you only see it now?" Understanding settled into place. It was growing the whole time. Just because I could not see it did not mean the work was not happening. Fumio nodded. "And what else have you learned?" Saburo reflected. "I learned I cannot make the seed grow faster by wanting it to, or by proving how much I know. The seed grows according to its own nature, in its own time. All I can do is offer conditions: water, soil, protection, and then trust the process." "Yes," Fumio said. "And how does this apply to your practice?" Saburo fell silent for a moment. "I arrived full of knowledge, proud of what I understood, expecting to master your teachings quickly. But now, I see knowledge is like a seed before planting. It has potential, but it is not yet the living tree. True understanding takes time and patience, and inspection. It requires doing the work without constantly checking for progress." Fumio smiled. "The seed also teaches humility. No matter how much it knows about being a tree, it must still grow step by step. It cannot skip seasons or force results." He walked to the window and motioned for Saburo to join him. Outside, the mountains stood silent and patient, snowbound, waiting to melt in time. "You came with much knowledge," Fumio said gently. "But knowledge without humility becomes a barrier. Ars, practice is not about collecting more understanding. It is about becoming like soil, open, receptive, patient, willing to practice daily without demanding visible results, trusting that deep work is happening even when unseen." Saburo bowed deeply. He understood why this lesson had been given. His pride had been like a hard shell, preventing growth. The months of watering bare soil were necessary not for the seed, but for his own change. He learned to practice without needing constant proof. "Continue caring for the tree," Fumio said. "It will take years to mature. But the teaching is already here, in offering care without attachment to outcome. This is humility." This lesson of the seed speaks to something essential in Zen Buddhism. Real transformation cannot be rushed. We often practice expecting quick results, needing evidence that change is happening. But the seed teaches otherwise. Most of its important work happens in darkness, beyond what the eye can see. Roots grow before shoots appear. Inner changes come before outer signs. Judging too early, we may think nothing is happening. But this is mistaken. In practice, the deepest shifts often occur beneath awareness, slowly and quietly. We meditate day after day, sometimes feeling stuck or unchanged. Yet something is forming in those hours. Patterns soften. The mind becomes familiar with stillness. Understanding ripens below thought. Even when progress is invisible, Fumio's teaching of humility invites us to release control over growth. Saburo arrived with great knowledge, but it had become an obstacle, identified with what he knew. He could not open to what he had yet to learn. He felt compelled to constantly prove his understanding, which blocked the quiet openness true learning requires. Months of watering empty soil taught him how to practice without feedback, without needing visible proof. This was humility. Continuing the daily work, simply because it was the work itself. It meant trusting the process even when results could not be seen. The seed also revealed natural timing. You cannot make it sprout faster through force or impatience. Each thing unfolds in its own season. Some insights appear quickly. Others take years to mature. Practice means offering conditions and trusting the pace of growth. In a valley where a river carved ancient stone, there stood a small village. A Zen teacher named Ichiro lived in a simple hermitage on the hillside, overlooking the valley below. At night, the sky opened wide, stars shining so close they felt almost within reach. Ichiro had lived there many years, and villagers noticed his rhythm. With the dark new moon, he would sit long hours in meditation. Sometimes through the entire night, when the moon grew full and bright, he became active teaching, helping with work, engaging fully with people. This pattern intrigued a young monk named Kenshin, who arrived one spring to study with Ichiro. Kenshin struggled with a long-standing concern. His practice felt inconsistent. Some weeks he felt clear and energized, his meditation deep and insight sharp. Other weeks he felt dull and scattered, as if nothing progressed. He tried to maintain the same intensity every day, forcing discipline through low periods. This left him exhausted. After pushing too hard, he would burn out and need rest. The cycle deeply frustrated him. He longed for steady practice without constant highs and lows. One evening, soon after arriving, Kenshin sat with Ichiro on the hillside as the sun set and stars appeared. The moon was a thin crescent, just beginning its monthly cycle. "Teacher," Kenshin said, "I've noticed your practice follows the moon. Why is this? Should effort not remain constant, regardless of conditions?" Ichiro gazed at the crescent moon and smiled gently. "Tell me," he said, "does the moon apologize for waxing and waning? Does it believe it should always be full?" "No," Kenshin answered. "The moon follows its natural cycle, growing toward fullness, fading into darkness, then beginning again." "Yes," Ichiro said. "And do you see the waning moon as inferior? Is darkness a failure?" Kenshin reflected. "No, both phases are necessary. Darkness reveals the stars. Fullness lights the night. Each serves its purpose." "Then why?" Ichiro asked softly. "Do you judge your own inner cycles as problems?" Kenshin felt something shift, though he could not yet explain it. In the weeks that followed, Ichiro asked him to observe the moon and his inner states, without trying to change them. As the moon waxed, growing from crescent toward fullness, Kenshin noticed he felt naturally more open, more energized, drawn toward action and connection. As the moon waned, moving back into darkness, he felt more inward, reflective, and inclined toward quiet and stillness. At first, Kenshin tried to keep his practice the same despite these inner changes, but Ichiro encouraged him to experiment, adjusting practice to match his inner season. "When you feel expansive," Ichiro said, "practice in ways that honor that expansion. Engage with teachings. Work with the energy that is present. When you feel quiet and inward, honor that by entering silence and stillness. Do not fight your natural rhythm." Kenshin began following this guidance. In expansive phases, he studied texts, discussed teachings with Ichiro, and worked actively in the village. In inward phases, he spent long hours in meditation, sometimes sitting through the night as Ichiro did during dark moons. Something shifted. Instead of seeing quiet phases as failure, Kenshin began valuing them. Insights from stillness later informed his active practice, while active periods gave material to integrate during silence. One evening, as the moon neared fullness, Kenshin and Ichiro sat again on the hillside. The valley below glowed in silver light, every detail revealed. "I am beginning to understand," Kenshin said. "I have been judging my inward times as inferior to my energized, outward phases. And that was really hard. I kept forcing myself to be productive, to show progress, even when it went against my rhythm." Ichiro nodded. "The moon does not try to remain full," he said. "It completes the whole cycle, trusting that waning is as necessary as waxing. Darkness prepares the way for light. Fullness gives way to emptiness, so fullness can return." He gestured to the bright moon above. "This moment of light exists only because darkness came before it, and this fullness will fade, making space for darkness once again. So I should trust the cycle," Kenshin said. "When I feel inward, instead of resisting or judging it, I should enter it deeply, knowing it serves its purpose. And when I feel energized, I should use that energy fully, knowing it too will pass." "Yes," Ichiro said. "This is practicing with wisdom, not against your nature. Some students force the same effort every day, the same intensity. This leads to exhaustion. We are not machines. We are like the moon, like seasons, like tides. We move naturally between expansion and contraction, action and rest, outward engagement, and inward reflection." In the months that followed, Kenshin learned to recognize his cycles more clearly. They often aligned with the moon, though not exactly. Some inward phases lasted longer. Some expansive periods were brief. But instead of resisting these shifts, he worked with them. When practice felt deep, he did not cling to it. He knew it would change. When practice felt dull or difficult, he did not despair or judge himself as failing. He knew this phase would pass as well, giving way to something new. One night during a new moon, when the sky was fully dark and filled with stars, Kenshin entered meditation with a depth he had never known. The darkness outside mirrored an inner darkness. Not negative, but deeply still, like the silence at the bottom of a deep well. Within that darkness, clarity arose. He saw he had been resisting life itself, trying to remain one way when life asks us to be many ways. He had tried to live in constant summer, forgetting that winter carries its own gifts. When he emerged from meditation and saw Ichiro gazing at the stars, Kenshin bowed deeply. "Thank you," he said simply. "I understand now. These cycles are not obstacles to practice. They are the practice. Learning to move with them, to honor every phase, to trust the natural rhythm. This is wisdom." Ichiro smiled softly in the darkness. "Yes, and now you can stop exhausting yourself trying to be the full moon all the time. You can be what you are in each moment, trusting the cycle to continue, knowing that what wanes will wax again, that darkness and light both serve the path." The teaching of the waxing and waning moon points to something we often resist: the natural cycles of our energy, attention, and capacity. We live in a culture that praises constant productivity and steady output. We judge ourselves when our energy drops or when practice feels uninspired. We assume something is wrong during inward or quiet periods. But the moon teaches otherwise. Its waning is not failure. Its darkness is not lesser than its brightness. Every phase has its role. Darkness reveals stars hidden by full light. Waning teaches letting go, the natural process of emptying and dissolving. Waxing teaches gathering, building, and moving toward fullness. In Zen Buddhism, practice must be sustainable, which means honoring natural rhythms instead of fighting them. Some days, weeks, or months we feel clear, inspired, deeply engaged. Other times, practice feels dull or heavy, and we may need to simply maintain continuity rather than expect breakthroughs. Kenshin's error was believing energized phases were good and quiet phases were bad. He exhausted himself, trying to stay constantly energized, then collapsed. But when he learned to recognize and honor his cycles, practice became sustainable. Quiet times became periods of integration rather than something to push through. Expansive times became chances to use energy fully instead of hoarding it in fear. The wisdom here is trusting the cycle. In fullness, we practice fullness without clinging. In emptiness, we practice emptiness without despair. Each phase prepares the next. A tree shedding leaves in autumn is not dying. It is preparing for spring. A practitioner in a quiet phase is not regressing. They are integrating and preparing for growth. This is the teaching of natural cycles, showing us how to practice with the grain of our nature, not against it. Trusting that what wanes will wax again, and what empties will eventually fill. In the mountains where ancient pine trees rose tall and straight, there stood a monastery renowned for its vast library. The library building stood apart from the main temple, built of stone with high ceilings and tall windows that welcomed the cool northern light. Shelves covered every wall, filled with scrolls and bound volumes gathered across centuries. Some were Buddhist sutras, others commentaries by renowned masters, and others philosophical works from many traditions. A young monk named Masaru had recently arrived. He was 26 years old and had spent the previous 5 years traveling between temples, studying under different teachers, gathering teachings the way others collect rare treasures. His notebooks were filled with copied insights, learned practices, and wisdom gathered from masters across the region. Masaru loved the library. He spent long hours reading texts, taking careful notes, absorbing the accumulated knowledge of generations. He believed studying others' discoveries would help him avoid mistakes and accelerate his own understanding. The head librarian was an elderly monk named Takashi, who had tended the collection for 40 years. He was about 65, with fingers darkened by old ink and eyes tired from decades of reading dim script. Yet his presence carried a quiet contentment, as if his work touched something deeper than the words he preserved. One afternoon, Masaru sat reading a commentary on the Diamond Sutra, taking notes as usual. Takashi was shelving newly acquired texts. "Takashi," Masaru said, lifting his head. "I've been thinking. I've studied with many teachers and read countless texts, yet I wonder if I truly understand anything, or if I'm only filling my mind with borrowed words. How do I know which teachings are true? How can I tell genuine wisdom from clever ideas?" Takashi paused and looked at Masaru gently. After a long silence, he said, "Come with me. There is something I want to show you." He led Masaru to a rarely visited section of the library where the oldest texts were kept. These documents were so fragile they were handled only with great care, and only when necessary. Takashi unlocked a wooden cabinet and removed an object wrapped in silk. He slowly unfolded the cloth, revealing a book. It was leather-bound, with fine paper pages. Yet when Masaru looked closer, something felt strange. When Takashi opened the book and turned the pages, Masaru saw they were completely blank. Every page was empty, untouched by ink. "What is this?" Masaru asked in confusion. "This," Takashi said quietly, "is the most important book in our library. It has been here longer than any other text we possess. Every abbot who has led this monastery has known of it and passed that knowledge onward." Masaru stared at the empty pages. "But nothing is written here. How can it be important?" Takashi closed the book carefully, holding it so Masaru could see the worn leather cover. "It is empty because it is waiting. It has waited for centuries and will continue to wait. It represents something no text can contain, no matter how ancient or profound." He handed the book to Masaru, who received it carefully, feeling its weight. The leather was soft with age, the binding firm, marked by the quiet passage of time. You come to this library every day, Takashi said. You read words written by masters who lived centuries ago. You copy their insights, memorize their teachings. This is not wrong. Learning from those before us has value. But tell me, whose life are you actually living? Masaru opened his mouth, then stopped. He did not know how to answer. The words on these shelves, Takashi continued, gesturing around, belonged to people who looked deeply into their own experience. They sat with their minds, faced their fears and desires, and discovered understanding through their own practice. The books record what they found. But the books are not the finding itself. They are maps of journeys taken by others. He took the empty book from Masaru and opened it to the blank pages. This book represents the journey you have not yet taken, the understanding you have not yet discovered. Ours. These insights can only arise from your direct experience, not from reading about someone else's. Masaru felt discomfort stir in his chest. But shouldn't we learn from those who came before us? He asked. Why reinvent what is already known? Yes, Takashi agreed. We study their methods and insights. Then we must close the books and live our own lives. We must meet our experience directly and fill our empty book with what we discover, not copies of what others found. He wrapped the empty book in silk again. Every sincere practitioner must eventually stop reading about the path and actually walk it. Closing others' books and opening your own does not reject the teachings. It completes them by making them real through experience. In the weeks that followed, Masaru spent less time in the library. Takashi's words planted a question that would not leave him. He noticed how often he compared his experience to books. In meditation, he checked whether his state matched descriptions. When difficulties arose, he searched notes instead of meeting the difficulty itself. One evening, Masaru approached Takashi, who worked by lamplight. I've been thinking about the empty book, Masaru said. I see that I've been living through others' words, using their insights instead of my own experience. But I don't know how to begin filling my own book. Where do I start? Takashi smiled. You already have. Recognizing this is the first mark on the first page, the acknowledgement that you've been living someone else's story. He set aside his catalog. The practice is simple. Notice what is actually present, not what books say should be. When you meditate and the mind is restless, don't reach for a text about restlessness. Sit with it. See what it truly is in your experience. This direct seeing, meeting your life as it is how you write in your empty book. But what if I discover nothing profound? Masaru asked. What if my experience feels ordinary compared to great masters? Takashi answered gently. Your experience is yours. It may be simple, even mundane. Most of life is, but it is real. One honest insight from direct seeing is worth more than 1,000 borrowed ideas. Masaru began to practice in a new way. Instead of immediately turning to texts and teachings, he started to notice what was truly happening in his experience. When sadness arose, he did not recall what masters had written. He simply felt it, sensed where it lived in his body, and watched how it shifted moment by moment. When joy appeared, he met it directly, rather than through ideas about joy. This was more difficult than he expected. Without teachings to lean on, without confirmation from respected texts, uncertainty arose. Was he practicing correctly? Was what he noticed meaningful? He had to learn to trust his own seeing without constant reference to authority. Months passed as Masaru continued meeting his experience directly. Gradually, something changed. He began noticing things he had never encountered in any book, small recognitions unique to his own mind, his conditioning, his particular way of being. These insights were not dramatic or destined to become famous teachings. They were simple, honest observations about how his mind functioned, what restricted him, and what allowed freedom. One evening, he returned to Takashi in the library. I am beginning to understand, he said. The empty book is not truly empty. It is filled with potential, waiting for me to discover what is already here. My experience is the text. My practice is reading it. Takashi nodded gently. Yes. Now you see why the empty book is the most important book in this library. Each person must write it for themselves. We can read endless wisdom, Takashi continued. But until we uncover our own wisdom through experience, we are only wearing borrowed clothes. This teaching of the empty book touches something central in Zen. Real understanding must be discovered firsthand, not learned secondhand. We may study teachings, memorize sutras, and grasp ideas intellectually. All of this matters, but eventually, we must close the books and open ourselves to direct experience. Masaru's endless studying had been a form of avoidance. By comparing his life to texts, he kept distance from living it. He was chasing someone else's realization instead of his own. The empty book represents the unwritten story of our direct experience. It cannot be filled by copying others. It can only be written through honest attention to what is truly present in our lives. This does not mean rejecting teachings entirely. We still learn methods and principles. We benefit from the wisdom of tradition. But then we must test these in our own experience and discover what is true for ourselves. Zen offers a famous image. Do not confuse the finger pointing at the moon with the moon itself. Teachings only point. We must actually look. We must see the moon with our own eyes, reading about it, memorizing descriptions, collecting teachings. None of this equals seeing it directly. The practice Takashi points toward is learning to trust our own direct seeing, grounded in lived experience. When we notice something arising in our experience, we do not immediately compare it to what we have read or heard from teachers. We simply stay with what is present. We allow understanding to emerge from our own awareness rather than from borrowed ideas. This takes courage, because it means letting go of the safety that comes from matching authority. Yet this is how genuine understanding appears. Insights become truly ours because they arise from honest attention to lived experience. In a valley where small villages were linked by dirt roads and travelers passed through regularly, there was a remote settlement where life moved slowly, shaped by farming and fishing rhythms. On the edge of this village, in a modest riverstone dwelling, lived a Zen teacher named Gentaro. He was around 50, with a weathered face and hands shaped by years of labor. He was known not for grand teachings, but for a simple daily practice. Each morning before dawn, he walked to the village well. The well was deep, its water cold and clear, fed by a spring that never failed. Even in dry summers, Gentaro lowered the wooden bucket until it reached the water far below, then drew it up full. He did this with complete attention, as if the act itself were sacred rather than ordinary work. Villagers noticed he was never rushed or distracted, always fully present while drawing water. One autumn, a young monk named Yugji came to study with him. Yugji had practiced for years and knew meditation and study, yet felt something essential was missing from his path. Hearing that Gentaro's teaching was more direct, Yugji hoped to find what he lacked. When he asked to study, Gentaro simply nodded and said, "Tomorrow before dawn, come with me to the well." The next morning, while stars still filled the sky, Yugji met him as the village slept. They walked silently through empty streets to the well. There, Gentaro gestured for Yugji to look down. Yugji leaned over the stone rim and stared into darkness. He could see nothing. The well was too deep, the water invisible. "What do you see?" Gentaro asked. "Nothing," Yugji answered. "It's too dark. The water is too far below." Gentaro nodded and slowly lowered the bucket, hand over hand, until at last they heard the splash far beneath them. Then he began drawing it up, his movements steady and unhurried. The bucket emerged filled with clear, cold water. Gentaro poured some into a cup and offered it. "Drink." Yugji drank. The water was fresh and cold, refreshing after the walk in the early air. "This well has existed longer than memory," Gentaro said, coiling the rope. "Generation after generation has drawn from it. In abundance and in hardship, the water remains the same, always available to those who lower the bucket. He looked directly at Yugji and asked, "Tell me, where does this water come from?" "From an underground spring," Yugji replied, "feeding the well from below. It's still uniting. Yes, far beneath the surface, unseen and hidden, there is a source. We cannot see it or touch it directly, but when we lower the bucket deeply enough, the water fills it and can be brought up where it is needed." In the days that followed, Yugji accompanied Gentaro on his daily walks to the well. Each morning followed the same rhythm. The bucket was lowered into unseen depths and drawn up filled with fresh water. Each time, Gentaro moved with the same careful attention, as if it were the first time. After 1 week, he invited Yugji to draw the water himself. Yugji grasped the rope and lowered the bucket, feeling it descend into darkness. When he heard the splash and sensed it fill, he pulled it upward, surprised by the effort required. "It's heavy," Yugji said, lifting it over the stone rim. "Yes," Gentaro replied. "The deeper the source, the more effort it takes to bring it to the surface. But water from deep places is always pure and fresh, filtered through layers of stone and earth." He poured water into 2 cups and handed one to Yugji. They drank together in the quiet morning. "You came here seeking teaching," Gentaro said. "You have studied with other teachers and learned many practices. You have gathered knowledge about Buddhism, meditation, and the path. But tell me, have you discovered the well within yourself?" Yugji hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Most practitioners," Gentaro continued, "remain at the surface. They work only with obvious thoughts, emotions, and reactions. This has value. But it is like drawing water from a puddle instead of a well. A puddle is easy to reach, but shallow, unstable, and easily exhausted." He gestured toward the well. "A deep well takes more effort. You must lower the bucket through familiar layers of ordinary awareness. But when you reach the depth, what you find there is pure and inexhaustible. This is what Zen points to the deep source within awareness itself." Over the following weeks, Gentaro showed Yugji how to access this inner depth. It was not mysterious or complex. It required patience and steady practice. In meditation, instead of staying with surface thoughts and sensations, Yugji learned to let his attention sink deeper, like a bucket descending. He did not force it or try to achieve anything special. Still, at first, his attention was easily caught by surface activity. Thoughts pulled him into distraction. But gradually, through daily practice, he began to sense a difference between surface mind and something deeper beneath it. There was an awareness beneath the constant movement, beneath thoughts and reactions. It felt like the water in the well, always present, always clear, always available, when he remembered to lower the bucket deeply enough to reach it. One morning before dawn, after weeks of practice, Yugji sat in meditation. His attention sank through familiar thinking, through habitual patterns of mind, into something he had not fully recognized before, a quiet depth that felt stable, clear, and alive beneath everything else, a depth of awareness that existed before thoughts appeared, before reactions took shape. It was not empty or blank as nothingness, but more like fullness, a living presence, awareness knowing itself. He remained there a long time, not naming or analyzing it, simply resting in direct experience. When he finally opened his eyes, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. As always, he found Gentaro at the well, drawing water for the day. Yugji watched, and the simple motion of lowering the bucket and lifting water from the hidden source struck him as a complete teaching. This is what practice is: returning again and again to the depth, drawing from the inner source, bringing clarity and freshness up to the surface where life is lived. "Teacher," Yugji said, stepping closer, "I think I understand. The well is within. The source is always present, always fresh, always available. But I must make the effort to go deep enough to reach it. I cannot skim the surface and expect to draw the deepest water." Gentaro nodded, a quiet smile crossing his weathered face. "Yes, and now you see why I come here every morning," he said. not only for water, but to remember the movement from surface to depth, to stay connected to the source that never dries. He placed the bucket into Yugji's hands. Your practice now is this. Find the well within yourself each day. Lower the bucket through surface activity. Reach the depth. Draw from it. Bring that freshness into daily life. Yugji lowered the bucket, feeling it descend, hearing the distant splash below. As he lifted it, feeling its weight, he realized this simple action held everything about practice. The depth is always present. We only need to remember to lower the bucket far enough. This teaching of the deep well points to what distinguishes Zen from surface-level practice. Working only with obvious thoughts and emotions is not enough. Though valuable, true transformation requires contact with deeper awareness, the source feeding all experience. Gentaro's daily act of drawing water is a perfect image for meditation itself. We lower attention through surface layers, thoughts, reactions, habits. These are easy to reach, but easily disturbed. Beneath them lies something deeper, more stable, more fundamental. This depth is not created or achieved. It already exists, like water in the well. It takes effort not because the depth is distant, but because we cling to surface activity. We mistake ripples for water, passing thoughts for awareness. Practice is returning to depth again and again, daily, as Gentaro returned to the well each morning. Each meditation lowers the bucket once more. Each moment of remembering draws from the inner source. Surface experiences rise and fade, but the depth remains constant, clear, fresh, inexhaustible. This is the teaching of the deep well, always waiting to nourish our lives. As the night grows deeper and we near the doorway of sleep, may these teachings settle softly into your awareness, like water soaking into the soil. The stories we have shared point towards simple yet profound truths about presence and acceptance, about cycles and growth, about the depth within your own awareness. You do not need to remember every detail. You do not need to fully analyze or understand. These teachings work quietly, like water shaping stone, slowly and patiently over time. Let them rest within you as you rest in this breath, this moment, this gentle movement towards sleep and renewal. For now, there is only this settling, this letting go, this trust in the natural process of rest and restoration. Allow yourself to be held by silence, as the valley is held by mountains.